All right, well, we are going to jump in. And so, first up, we're going to talk about choosing the right manufacturing model. And I'd like to begin by talking about the foundational question that shapes so many of our decisions, and that is, how do companies choose the right manufacturing model in the first place? And so, Omkar, I would love to start with you. From your work across both emerging biotechs and larger biopharma companies, and certainly in your tenure at Deloitte, what are the most common mistakes that you find companies are making when selecting a manufacturing model, perhaps too early in development?
Thank you, Erin. And first of all, thank you for even having me here. A very pertinent topic at a very pertinent time in the industry, just given what's happening in the world. Manufacturing and supply chain risks are definitely top of mind for most executives. And to your point, I've been doing this for about 10 years or so at Deloitte. And what I've seen is the most expensive mistake that is very often made is treating your manufacturing model decision as a facilities decision rather than an operating model decision. So leaders typically ask build or outsource before they've answered some of the more fundamental questions, right? For example, what does the process actually require? What variability can the biology tolerate? What does the patient journey demand in terms of scheduling, logistics, release timelines? That's the most expensive mistake that I've seen that's been made. The second one that comes to mind is optimizing for the next clinical milestone rather than the full product lifecycle. So in phase one, the pressure is speed, right? Get the materials made, dose the patients, conserve cash. Completely understandable. And I've worked with a lot of companies who are in that early stage of development and funding. However, if the team does lock in a process and a supplier base or even a digital technology stack that cannot support that comparability, scalability, or even multi-site execution, they may save 3 months at the beginning, but they lose on 18 months or more later. So in an industry where there are over 1,000 CGT clinical trials active in the globe right now, the competitive cost of a late stage manufacturing reset is not hypothetical, it's real. And then the other mistake that I would highlight is just underestimating the cost of change. I've seen this time and again in my few years in this industry. In CGT, a process change is rarely just a process change. It can cascade into, of course, analytical development, comparability studies, regulatory engagement, tech transfer, digital system updates, right? And sometimes even full clinical bridging studies. So the FDA's guidance on CGT manufacturing changes is explicit that these products require a life cycle approach to manage this change and assess the impact on the quality. So to sum it up, the uncomfortable truth that most CGT companies know this intellectually and most still get it wrong in reality. It's because of the clinical urgency, which is too loud, manufacturing discipline is too quiet, until it really isn't. So my suggestion to all my clients has always been design the manufacturing model like you're planning a city, not pitching a tent.
Oh, I love that. That's terrific. What a great way to put it. So thank you for that overview. That's very helpful. Now you did mention, of course, the clinical needs and then working your way toward commercialization. Are there any specific signals or I don't know, maybe red flags, or for a better way to put it, that tell you a company is designing for today's clinical needs instead of, or for tomorrow's commercial realities?
Yeah, good question. So the clearest signal is operational heroics, right? Senior scientists are manually troubleshooting every batch. The QA teams are processing exceptions one by one. The supply chain teams are coordinating patient slots through spreadsheets, right? That gets you through phase one, no doubt, but it does not survive a phase three enrollment, let alone a commercial launch. That is the clearest signal. And another signal I would say is the is treating the process instability as the norm. I know we always say that in this space, variability and variations is the standard, is the norm. That's true. But if the batch records change so frequently and deviations are expected rather than just investigated, or in-process controls are weak, or the analytical package cannot explain the variability in the product quality, that company is still in that clinical survival mode. And that does not translate, right? Because consider the stakes over here. I've seen that about 2 to 9% or 2 to 10% of the commercial autologous CAR T batches are rejected due to a manufacturing failure. And I've also seen, and at one point there have been reports about 30% of those. So if 5%, let's say, rough math, right, out of spec is manageable when you're talking about 50 patients. When we're talking about 5,000 patients, it means hundreds of patients are waiting and they're not able to make the treatment. So that is yet another very clear signal. So this simple diagnostic test that I use is, if the demand doubled tomorrow, and if one site went down, or if a clinical raw material was delayed by 6 weeks, would the team know what to do in the first hour? If not, that model is still clinical and not ready for commercial readiness.
That's such a great metric and way to judge it by. And I'm suspecting that most companies cannot do that. And that's the part that they have to work on. Okay. Thank you, Omkar. Zoe, I'd love to talk to you about, you've led process development and tech transfer efforts across multiple organizations. And now, of course, you're with Legend Biotech as overseeing CMC pipeline strategy. When evaluating centralized versus decentralized manufacturing, what would you say are the most important scientific and operational variables you consider first?
Yeah, so thank you for inviting me, and it's such a pleasure to join this conversation. Obviously, you always have to start with the needs, right, of the product, as well as the patient population, and also assess the process complexity and process stability, and never forget about the chain of identity requirement. And you also have to evaluate your scalability, quality oversight, and also supply chain logistics. Consider how consistently the process can be executed across those sites while maintaining the product quality. Decentralized manufacturing may be a suitable model for the autologous treatment, which requires highly automated and fully closed manufacturing, and never forget the testing. The platform to de-risk some of the environmental and human introduce the variability across the sites. And then often people don't really remember QA plays a big role in our tech transfer as well. So quality assurance oversight can be a significant challenge for decentralized model. However, during the advancement of the technology, digitization of quality management system and manufacturing execution system, as well as the quality control system, could leverage that capability and also enable our QA function as remotely centralized.
Terrific. Okay. I want to talk a little bit and maybe go deeper into, you mentioned certainly, the autologous modality. Let's talk a little bit about how does modality actually fundamentally alter anyone's decision framework, and whether, for example, autologous versus allogeneic. How does modality play in?
Yeah, modality is a significant factor in the decision making. So autologous therapy often require greater coordination of patient-specific manufacturing and logistics, because the manufacturing is basically patient-specific. But in allogeneic, such as in vivo, including in vivo, the approach may offer a very different opportunities for manufacturing scale and also inventory management. So currently, there is a lot of interest and progress made on in vivo products in this field. And a new modality could impact the overall decision framework. But regardless of the modality, and patient-centric and maintaining product quality and consistency remains the top priority. And patient experience and access the drug also plays a great role in this decision.